You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today we're going to be speaking about drone photography and specifically women drone photographers and pilots. Our first guest will be Carmaine Means, who is a national field camera operator for CBS News and an FAA licensed drone pilot. After a break, we're going to be joined by Yasmin Tajik, an Arizona-based documentary photographer, certified drone pilot, and the brand ambassador for the advocacy group Women Who Drone. First up is Carmaine Means. In addition to being a national field camera operator for a CBS network news division, Carmaine Means is a photojournalist, editor, aerial cinematographer, and FAA licensed drone pilot. Carmaine is a recipient of several Emmy Awards for her news work in her native Chicago and is now based in Los Angeles working for CBS News. Welcome to the show, Carmaine.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a great
So
intro.
You're in Los Angeles now, is that correct?
I am. I'm based out of the LA, what they call the LA bureaus for CBS News.
Okay, gotcha. Now, question for you, talking about CBS News. The integration of like drone footage into news reporting happened pretty quickly, which shouldn't be surprising considering how much easier it's become to operate these drones and how much smaller they become. It's just easy to get around with them. When did you first start incorporating drones into your tool belt?
I first started incorporating drones as far as being a photojournalist in 2016. That's when I got my license to operate commercially. And at the time while I was at the what we call an O&O, the local station for CBS in Chicago, WBBM, my direct manager had come to me and asked me if I would help him to start pretty much a drone program. And before then, I had been flying. I just hadn't gotten my commercials license to do so.
How long had you been flying?
I had been flying since 2015.
And it's just something that struck you as an interest, or?
It's funny. I was actually, how that came about. I was at the time working at another station, for an ABC station in Chicago. I was freelancing, worked for a lot of different places, and I was just so happened to be there. And we were doing a consumer segment in the studio, and the guy came in with a Phantom 1.
I owned one of those. I should say, yeah. I crashed one of those many times.
Yeah, he came in with the DJI Phantom 1 is marketing as the hottest new Christmas toy. And at the time, and I'm like, well, you can do a lot more with that besides kind of like whip it around the yard. And it just immediately, I started thinking of ways how to use that in journalism, because, and I come from also a production background. So, I'm used to operating jibs and steady cams and things like that. And I'm like, this can I said, if they put a gimbal on it, it would be great. If, you can use a stabilizer on it, and it would become more than just what the Phantom 1 was, which was a hot air balloon shot. I mean, you could just snap a GoPro to it and it just like floats up in the air. You don't want to go too fast because it starts shaking and then let it float back down. But, that's known as it's a jib shot, pretty much.
Was there any reluctance on the part of editors or your producers at the beginning, or were they all about it?
Not so much as the editors. The producers, no, they, the interesting thing about it is that in Chicago, there were two of us who started flying early because we were exposed to the technology at ABC 7 back in late 2013 when the guy came in with the Phantom 1. So another colleague of mine, he immediately went out and bought one. So he, you start posting to social media. That's exactly what happened. And then when I went out and got mine, I started posting to social media, which was before the Part 107 in 2016. So my other colleague, his name is Colin Hinkle, and he owns Soaring Badger. But he went out and immediately got one, and he got one of the original exemption 333s. So in Chicago, it was, and he was an established photographer in the market. So he, we were the first two in the market to actually start flying. He was the first one to get an exemption, and I was the first one to get the Part 107.
If I could just kind of for a second, talking on that topic about with permits and all that stuff, when you first started shooting with these drones, it was kind of the Wild West because it was an unknown and the laws were real loosey-goosey. I mean, you knew you couldn't really fly or shouldn't fly near an airport, but the rules were not really firm, and even I think law enforcement didn't even know what to do about this stuff originally. No. Things have changed a lot since then. Has it reined in what you can do, or are you able to still work within the regulations that you are sworn to, essentially?
Well, typically what we do as far as CBS, we try to work within the regulations. But of course, you see quite a few drone video and drone shots, which could be illegal, but may not be. Where you see them obviously flying over cars and over people, but you don't know what types of authorizations or COAs that they have,
right?
Or that particular pilot at that time, what they were able to achieve, or what waivers. So,
as a news gatherer, are you able to fly over groups of people? Because essentially, that's what a lot of what you have to do is involving.
No, you're not. Only if you get the authorization, the certificate of authorization to do so. If they want to grant that to you as an individual and as a pilot, they can do that. I mean, CBS, I could be granted as a company, but I would assume that they would have to get their entire fleet done, right, to be able to do that. And at the moment, that's not the case. So. It's and with most broadcasting companies, that's not the case, because a lot of broadcasting companies do not have drone programs, really truly interactive drone programs. The only one that has a really, really good one is Warner Media, which is CNN. They were one of the first ones, actually. So.
And can you kind of walk us through some of the decisions you'll make when you're thinking, all right, I have this story and I think a drone would serve it, and then you'll decide one way or the other based on a number of factors. But is there kind of a process, and does that include your producers and everybody else?
It does.
And if I could tack one extra thing on that, do you always keep the drone handy with you? Because I know they're pretty small these days. So can I just assume that it's part of your toolkit all the time? And then you can answer John.
Yeah. So we'll get to the first one. We, as far as CBS goes, because all of our photographers are not licensed. So there's a few out of the group, particularly at the network division. I cannot speak for the O&Os. I don't know how many of them now at this point are licensed and not, compared to the ones that are not. But as the network division, out of CBS having somewhere in around about globally 35 plus photographers, maybe no more than 40, who are full-time staff. There's 3 of us out here in Los Angeles, and then there's 1 or 2 in New York, and there's 1 in the South Bureau, and maybe 1 in DC. So you're talking about maybe a total of, 6 people out of 40. So, there's 2 drones for Los Angeles. I don't know how many New York has and what they do. So no, we don't always travel with us. It's kind of pre-planned in advance, because, really outside of truly breaking news in what we cover and what we do at network, we don't really have to roll around like all of a sudden there's this event or something that happens and we're there, and then you have the drone. It's more, our shoots are more pre-planned out, for sure. And, we communicate with the producers that are all involved in on the story on how about what we're going to use this for, and maybe what shots that I may envision of us using it for. I'm not an advocate of using the drones just for the sake of getting aerials, because sometimes it just doesn't fit. It doesn't necessarily fit to add aerial footage of necessarily a home where there was someone who was murdered. I don't see the point of that. That's not adding any value, and it's such a dynamic tool. It really is. You're talking about your level of degrees of your wide angle that you can get, and it really does. If you're really a good pilot, it really can bring just different things. You can view them so differently, and it makes you change the way of maybe even how you view the story. So I'm not a person who flies like that and believes in that. I think that if it's the right story, then the benefits, you can definitely reap the benefits of that with
So in other
visual
words, if you
storytelling.
flies, don't pull out a screwdriver. That's really what it works out to.
Yes,
It's a tool
absolutely.
in your tool chest. So depending on what
Right.
the assignment is, okay, what's the
Exactly.
best tool that I need to get this
Exactly.
done? And that's really what it boils down to.
Right. If I'm shooting down or have a bit of a throw, I'm more going to use a telephoto lens than maybe a shorter wide angle. Correct. So it's just that simple.
When you're at that point and you've decided along with the producers that you're going to go ahead and use a drone, do you then need to ask for that? Do you need to, what's the next step there? Do you need to speak
Well,
with the FAA?
I go and look up the coordinates on different apps that I have on my phone to see if there is going to be a TFR.
TFR being?
Temporary flight restriction or a no-fly zone or an NFC. So you have to, because, they just are saying, we're going to go to this location. We want to use a drone. It's your job to do the kind of the legwork to say if it's even possible for you to do, or what do I have to do it to make this happen? And maybe if that can't happen, is there any kind of concessions that somewhere where we can fly that they will absolutely go for? So I have to do my homework. It's an interesting kind of situation because I know of guys who will put it up anyway. So, those are the things that you absolutely should do in order to just ensure safety and follow the rules. That's kind of a little bit of the process.
Do you remember the first time you flew a drone for a news story? Can you kind of recount that and how it went?
One of the first times I was asked actually to go out, and this was in 2016, I believe. There was a huge warehouse fire, and there were emergency vehicles everywhere. Firemen up on ladders and trying to hose this huge warehouse down. And my assignment editor asked me, she said, "Oh yeah, can you take the drone and go get drone shots?" And immediately I said to her, no, that's not possible because you have emergency services that are out. And, when you have that kind of situation, you can't fly over that. You should not. I see people who do it. I don't agree with that because those guys are busy doing things. And the last thing that they need is to have a drone interfering in some way with a fireman that's up on the ladder or shooting the water or trying to do things just because you're trying to get shots that are just way too close. So there's a way that you can go out away from that and get more of an aerial view of the area, but not be close to around them, but at that point, it goes to what exactly they're looking for and what you can give them. So that's where you have to make your decision and your judgment of whether you can or cannot. That was one of the times. The other time I went out is when a couple years ago, I was in Chicago. We had a winter where it was frigidly cold, and the lake froze over in these huge, almost looked like, the ice had broken up into almost like a puzzle. So they called me out to go get some aerial footage of that. I had to hurry up and get in my truck because I had to make the weekend evening news for network to send in the shots that they wanted. So that was like one of the first times that I had gone out for news to do those kinds of things. And I shot inside of the Museum of Science and Industry for a show that we were putting on at CBS for the end of the year Christmas deal.
Right.
So
if I could ask you something, you had mentioned that there are those that will sometimes fly there regardless. Are those the cowboys, or are those responsible people who work for like network news or responsible
No,
news
those
networks?
are more like cowboys. They usually what they try to do is market or sell their videos as stringer videos to the news organizations.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Mhm.
My assumption is that most, if not all, of the people who work for the news networks are going to follow the same protocols that you were
Yes.
talking about
Yes,
following.
for news photographers and guys who are licensed pilots, really, and especially in situations like that, follow the rules for the most part.
Okay.
I've not yet met a guy or a photographer, whether it's for Nat Geo or BBC or CNN or whomever, who just will be like, "Screw it, I'm just going to fly over people." That's
Yeah. Okay.
not
Yeah.
that's not because
So-
there's this huge protest and I just have to get that shot.
So
They're
you
essentially
mentioned
paparazzi.
you've
Exactly, they're
Carmaine,
drone paparazzis.
you said guys a few times, and I guess that's something I want to address, because when you're saying guys, are you just referring to guys as guys and girls?
Well,
or
I think I'm the only female. So
Yeah.
I am whew, let's see
Yeah.
here. So I am the only as far as I know, I am one of between the broadcast network stations, I am the only female network photographer
Mhm.
in the United States.
Who's FAA certified as
who's FAA
Yeah.
certified. I have not
Right.
run across or not even dealing with the FAA. I'm for
Right, cable.
NBC, CBS, and ABC. The as far as I know, and many of my male colleagues know, I'm the only female who works in the network division. And as far as drone licensed female pilot, yeah, I believe I'm the only one in network period, whether that's cable or broadcast, who pilot. Now, there is a colleague of mine that's in Chicago. Before I left, I trained her before I left. She is now licensed at WBBM, but it's very, very, very few who are in the broadcast industry who are licensed. But that being said, that's due to because there are very few women who are photographers compared to men.
Do you own the drone that you fly, or is that property CBS? What drone is it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I own several. So I own Phantom and an Inspire.
Okay. And what is your work one, or do you use both?
The work one I use is the Phantom. The CBS is pretty much a Phantom shop. They decided to order all Phantom 4 Pros. When network photographers travel, it's already the situation where we're carrying in upwards or traveling with in upwards of 10, 12, 15 cases of gear.
You're pack mules often.
Right.
You need Sherpas. If I can ask you a question, if you could improve something in the drones that you are currently using right now, what do you wish they would do or could do or you can do that would make them operate better? Like as a still photographer, I know what my cameras can do and can't do, and I know it frustrates me. What frustrates you right now as far as drones that you wish they would get past as far as technologies?
I think for news, the best thing that I can think of, especially for travel drones, for what we do, I wish they would have some sort of interchangeable lenses to them. So you can get the different types, much like the Inspire. The Inspire, you can interchange lenses. And that's going to give you a different type of effect of what you're shooting. Like the Mavic 2 Pro has a fixed lens capability. You can't zoom in with it. You can't zoom out with it. So even though they do have a Mavic 2 zoom, but you're going to lose. It has a different kind of camera and a different type of. It has the same sensor, but it's just a different type of camera. So the Mavic 2 Pro, you're going to get a better necessarily color palette out of it because it's Hasselblad parts, whereas the Mavic 2 Zoom is Sony parts. So
correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of have to shoot with wide angle a lot with these drones because as you zoom into longer focal lengths, the vibration aspect really gets magnified, like as when you're looking through a long lens or binoculars. So I'd imagine that there's a certain point where even perhaps towards normal lens focal lengths, whatever that would be on a drone, you could start picking up more vibration. Is that an issue? And is that why you?
No, you don't because the gimbals are so steady.
Okay.
So you don't really get a lot of vibration with that. It's again, and for DJI products, as far as cinematography and videography go, the Inspire is the standard. It's the top of the line. And you want to get different focal lengths because you want your shots to look a certain way, opposed to just having something fixed. And it's not going to give you the type of dynamic capabilities that are capable of being used through the drone. A lot of that you see in cinematography and videography on films, they're using different types of lenses. So it's going to be a total different shot than if I put my Mavic 2 Pro up on a fixed angle, that wide angle, and shoot the exact same thing. It's just going to, if I'm shooting a tower, I could just say a water tower in Michigan. If I put my Mavic 2 Pro up on a fixed lens, it's going to be different for me to get that shot. And I'm on my Inspire with and I'm maybe 6-7 feet away or coming in, and I have an 85 millimeter, some type of lens like that on it. I'm able to really manipulate my depth of field. Those kinds of things with the little travel drones, I wish that they would do differently, because the Inspires cost a lot of money. And most people can't afford that. Well, they do. I mean, those kits are starting at somewhere between $10,000-$11,000.
Right.
It's a pretty big rig, but it's it's a rig that can withstand a lot. You can put that thing up in 20, 30, 40 mile an hour winds, and it's going to be pretty steady.
Right.
Unlike, the smaller ones, even with all of the sensors that they use to keep it steady and in place with GPS and all of that, you can only fly those in they have wind restrictions to them. That's their safe operating procedure for the manufacturer. So,
And what is that? What's the highest wind you could fly these days?
You can fly up to 400 feet.
No, as far as winds and stuff.
Winds, it depends on what you have. A Phantom takes winds up to, they don't want you to fly in winds over 17 miles an hour.
Okay. All right. That's pretty brisk, but okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. With the Mavic 2 Pros now, they can, it's about the same now with that jammer. The original Mavic was probably around 12 to 15, but I've heard pilots who fly Mavics who aren't comfortable with winds up that high. It shakes around a bit more than the Phantom was doing. So, and because gotcha. the Mavic is a lighter hull, right. It's smaller, it's lighter. So even though it's got all of the sensors, it's got sensors everywhere, all around, but it's not as heavy. And you can tell when you fly them that you have a different level of comfort as you begin to fly the different types of rigs. It's just because it's heavier. So when you're in a situation where there's inclement weather and things like that, you're going to be more tense, or at least more conscious about what you're putting that up in, because you don't want it to fly away, especially if you're flying in GPS mode with high winds.
I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about what you had mentioned earlier about the fact that you're, one of very few women flying drones, at least professionally. And any thoughts you might have on how, we can change that, whether that be just through education or opportunities or how that works. Any thoughts on that subject?
It's education and opportunities. I think women have to be obviously given the opportunity to be able to show that they are more just as capable as flying as a man. So and we don't. And I am involved with groups like Women in Drones. I know the founder of Women in Drones, Sharon Rossmark. And, it's situation where it is an educational thing. And as we post more things are on social media. There are more meetup groups that are more women friendly. There have been meetup groups, flying groups that you'll find locally in your area. And there have been some complaints about them not being so friendly. Part of that, bringing more women on, is, having a area where they can feel comfortable with learning how to operate, so they can stay with it and doing it, so there's more opportunity that companies can have to then diversify their workforce with more women.
And also, there's also the financial aspect, which you mentioned, to get people started. Would you recommend any drones for someone, who's listening that maybe wanted to get into it?
If you're first getting started, I would say start out with like a Teleo. You need to start out with what basically essentially is a toy drone. You can start off with something like that and just, do drills. When I first started flying, I would just, lay low and just whiz my drone back and forth in the front yard, not going any more than 30 feet off the ground, just so I can get practice and you can get muscle memory and you can get a hold of what it is you're doing. I stayed in the forest preserve areas for a while before I had enough courage to go out and fly around landscapes and over water and off of cliffs in Colorado. It took me a while to get there. So, you just have to, it's just, them having the exposure to have those kind of services offered for women and being involved in different groups will get them to doing more things. I had done some things or was talking to the Girl Scouts about doing some things to expose young girls early about drones, and doing those kinds of things with those types of organizations. That's how you're going to see that kind of those numbers change and shift.
I have just one final question for you, and I'm asking this because, again, I at one point owned a drone, and we've spoken to a few other people who fly drones, and it's kind of a fun question. Have you lost one yet?
No.
Oh, wow.
Never lost one.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm a hero now. That's impressive. Okay, Carmaine, it's been wonderful talking to you, and it's a great story that you have, and continue the great work that you're doing, especially with getting more young women involved in network broadcasting and drone flying and all the other things that you're involved in. If people want to see some of your work, where can they go to? Websites or Instagram or anything of that sort?
Yes, Instagram is Carmaine_means. Website is cbsnews.com and dronegirlphotography.com.
Great stuff.
Thanks a lot. It was wonderful talking to you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we come back. We're going to be speaking with Yasmin Tajik. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. The best way to support the show is by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For links to gear and more information on today's guests, check out the show notes in your podcast app or visit our homepage on the B&H Explorer website and join the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back. Yasmin Tajik is a portrait and documentary photographer and FAA certified drone pilot based in Arizona. Her documentary work focuses on social causes and civil rights, including stories on refugee resettlement, asylum seekers, and sex trafficking. Yasmin has documented stories on gender equality in Iceland and Islam in Cuba. She's also the brand ambassador director for the organization Women Who Drone, with a platform to educate, inspire, and introduce others, particularly women, to the UAV industry. Welcome to our podcast, Yasmin.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you all today.
Great to have you. How did you get into droning?
Well, I'm a professional photographer. I've actually had my business for over 11 years now. And I started like a lot of other photographers, portraits, weddings, events, all that sort of stuff. and then transitioned more to documentary type work about 5 or 6 years ago. And, I saw drones kind of popping up over the past 5 or 6 years, but I was seeing a lot of men with drones and they were photographing landscapes. And I didn't really have a big interest in photographing landscapes at the time. And so I thought, oh, these are great. These are exciting, but I just didn't see it as something I needed to really research and maybe add into what I was offering at the time. So it was maybe about 3 years ago, I went on a trip with some of my photographer girlfriends and we all went to Iceland, and 2 of them brought drones. They brought the Mavics, which are the nice ones that fold down and really easy for travel. And so that was really my first opportunity seeing drones up close. Women were flying them, and I was watching them handle them in this beautiful landscape. And that's when the wheels started turning for me. And I started thinking, okay, this might be something I need to look into. And I started correlating it to how I was using my photography for documentary work. And I thought this could give me a really good, different perspective and something that other photographers aren't doing right now.
Well, speaking on that aspect of it, because, we all know about the restrictions in flying and obviously we'd like to talk to you about that a bit, but have you been able to kind of use it to its full capacity regarding the documentary work that you're doing, given, some of the restrictions that could apply?
Well, it's definitely challenging with FAA restrictions or in different countries that you're going to. Some countries don't allow drones at all. So I was in Jordan, about 1.5 years ago. Drones were not allowed at all there. I went to the highest levels I possibly could to try and get permission. Drones are not allowed into Cuba either. So, on some stories where I think it would really be important to be able to get an aerial perspective, especially like in Cuba when I was shooting that story on the Cuban Muslims, to get a perspective of where the mosque is in relation to everything else in the old town of Havana, I think would have been really interesting and critical to showing more about where it's located and how it's embedded into the local culture. But unfortunately, it's against the law. So I think,
If I could ask a quick question on that. When you say it's
Sure.
against the law, are drones forbidden, generally speaking, means you can't fly them, or is it only for news organizations that can't use them? Where do they draw the line?
Well, it depends on the country. So, in Jordan, even though I was explaining that I wanted to use it for documentary type of work, I was not going in with an agreement with a local organization. It was me coming in independently. So in that case, it was just a flat out no. But if I had partnered with maybe like the Travel Jordan Tourism Board or something like that, that's someone there locally that would then be hiring me to come in and document. And
in terms of the states here, if you decided you wanted to use a drone to cover issues regarding, refugee crisis, do you risk it just by putting it up there, or do you seek the approval that you need beforehand? How do you feel about that? How's that work?
I'm a very big advocate in following the rules and following the laws. Sometimes you hear from people, just do it anyway and then ask for forgiveness afterwards. Right. And I do not like that. I want to make sure that I'm following, because we're operating in federal airspace. So I want to make sure I'm licensed by the FAA. So I'm educated on what I can and cannot do. And there's different apps, there's different organizations. The FAA has their own website we can go to and find out what areas we're allowed to fly in. So I always do plenty of research ahead of time to check the airspace, check if there's any notice to airmen, so like NOTAMs, if there's any special event or even like a wildfire going on where you can't fly because they have the helicopters and other air vehicles that are assisting in maybe a wildfire, things like that. So you always want to make sure that you go through and follow the steps and really set out as a business owner, like making sure you set out a whole pre-flight checklist. Right. So not only are you checking, your gear and making sure the props and batteries, all that sort of stuff, but part of that critical process is going through and researching the area, what type of airspace you're in. Am I going to need to get any type of waivers, special permission, things like that. So yeah, definitely. I think it's really important to make sure you're educated on that. And you get that partly through getting certified from the FAA. And then also going through and making sure you have those like that checklist in place to cover your bases and make sure you're doing it all properly and legally.
And can you speak on an instance where you did use a drone to incorporate that kind of footage into the work you're doing?
So recently, with the whole COVID virus and all that, there's a lot of these mobile testing stations that have been set up around Phoenix and Scottsdale, and I'm very close to the Mayo Clinic, so I did send my drone up more recently and was able to get some aerial footage of one of the mobile testing stations that the Mayo Clinic had set up. And because it is a hospital setting, there is a certain range that you cannot fly in. So you have to make sure that you're staying out of that range. And some of the great things about these drones, like the Mavic 2 has the zoom lens on it. So that even though you're not physically as close, you can still zoom in and get footage. So I think it's really important, it's able to give a different perspective of telling the story of, hey, this is what's going on. It can show like the line of cars that are lined up to go in to get tested. Basically giving a different perspective to what's going on and a bigger picture also.
For sure. Yeah. And you're doing footage, you're doing video and stills at this time?
I do both, but I'm focusing mostly on stills because that's where my background is. I'm not really great at video editing. So luckily I do have some friends that are videographers, and if I have some great footage, I can always send it to them to help me edit it all. But I still do primarily focus on photography.
Gotcha.
On that note, if I could ask you a question, I've always been a still photographer, and on several occasions, I've started to play around with video. And I had a drone that I hacked a camera onto the base of for a while. What are the challenges that you found going from still photography into moving pictures, motion pictures, even if it's not from the sky, just the fact that you have to tell the story not in one frame, but in X amount of seconds or minutes?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think as the advantage is coming in as a photographer versus someone who doesn't have any background is, having those basics of storytelling and composition and exposure and all that sort of stuff. But for me, the big challenge was I was never thinking in how am I going to be piecing these together and what, how do I move the camera to create interest versus as a photographer, you're just standing still. So, that was a big challenge for me. And then of course, throwing a drone up in the air, like even just things doing like a reveal was something I, as a photographer, would never have thought of before. And now throwing up a drone up into the air and doing a reveal over a hillside or, from behind a cactus or, things like that. I mean, just trying those out with the drone was really exciting for me. And it really made me get excited about using the drone in more ways like that, because it was telling a story in a different way than I was used to before, and using a whole different skill set. So, definitely.
How long did it take you to get comfortable with that before the time you started flying and the time you said, no, I can now tell stories. This is now one of my tools. How long or how many hours of flying did it take you before you got good at it?
Well, I mean, I think it's still a process for me. I still feel like I'm very new to it, even though I feel like I have a certain skill set. I've been flying for a little over 2 years now. And I think one thing that really benefited me is that I found a local cinematographer who was an expert drone pilot, and he would teach workshops and all that. And I really just, kind of latched onto him. And as he would go out, around the state droning, I just went and spent a lot of time with him. And I didn't even take my drone out at first. I was just watching what he was doing and looking at the scene around me, and then looking at how he was videoing those scenes with his drone. And, there were things that he did that I was not even on my radar to photograph or to video. So I think that made a really big difference for me, is having someone that had such an excellent skill set that I could watch, and then I could try and mimic some of those things when I would go out on my own, or even if we were in the same location droning, I could look at the situation and go, okay, he did this, he did that, and this is the result he got. And then I could try it myself and then try something similar another time when I was out and try and get something very creative from that. So it's definitely, I feel like it's a really long process. It's not something that can get mastered right away. And especially for someone that may be new coming into the industry, you not only are having to learn the basics of how to capture a great a photo and how to capture great video, but then you're also applying that to a whole different medium. So, coming from the photography side, I felt like I had a jump start on it all, but then I kind of felt like, oh my gosh, now I'm doing video, and where do I even start? I felt like I was rewiring my brain a bit
So based on that comment, if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody who was starting out with drone photography, who again had a background and still understood the basis of photography, but it's now playing around with aerial photography, is there one piece of advice or guideline that you would give them as something just to keep in mind as you learn and move along?
Oh boy. I think it's just to try to really push the boundaries of creativity. We're so used to looking at everything on the ground, at a straight plane. Like we might tilt our camera up, we might tilt it down, but we're pretty much looking at it straight ahead where our eye level is. So now we've got something up in the air. And if you're just pointing it straight ahead, you're just seeing sky most of the time, so which is not very exciting for all your footage.
The novelty wears off after a while. It does.
Right. It does. I mean, it's great to get some of those shots and to play around, but once you can start manipulating how the camera is moving and turning the camera, like top-down shots are some of my absolute favorite shots. I don't get tired of those at all, and I just actually posted some on my social media channels. They're really my absolute favorite because we're seeing something from a completely different perspective, and all of a sudden we can start picking up on these nuances that we never would have noticed before because it's from that different angle. So I would say, kind of act like a 5-year-old, like you give a 5-year-old an iPad and they just start going, what does this do? What does that do? And they're just kind of playing around. So I would definitely say this is the time to really push that creativity and testing things out in ways that we aren't used to photographing. And I think people will be really pleasantly surprised.
I imagine with you're in Arizona and you have the desert scape and beautiful landscape everywhere. What's the scene out there? Are there a lot of flyers? Are there a lot of people who just kind of go out for the weekend and find an isolated patch of desert and fly? Or what is it? What's the community like out in Arizona?
I think we have a really great community here in Arizona. We're lucky we have great weather year round. We are restricted from flying in the heat of the summer because the drones just aren't allowed to fly at those extreme temperatures.
But what's your cutoff temperature? That's an interesting point, if I may ask. How hot can you fly?
I think it's 102, to be honest. I think it's 102. We're not allowed to fly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because, the batteries are lithium, everything will heat up, and of course we don't want anything dropping out of the sky or anything like that. So, but I do feel like Arizona is really a great state to be droning in. We have one of the only DJI authorized reseller stores here. So we have a direct line to DJI. They're experts. They can, answer any questions. They do workshops. You can walk right in and they've got all the gear, everything. So I think people are really happy about that. They take advantage of coming into that local store. And Arizona is also one of the top states for for rewarding manned pilot licenses. So there's a lot of overlap between manned pilots that are flying airplanes and unmanned pilots, which are us who are flying drones and things like that. So there's a big overlap there. And then, we've got a great community I feel like Arizona just has this really great community of helping each other out, learning from each other. We're one of the biggest cities in the country, and it's a big city, but it doesn't feel like it. So it's really been great. People are very supportive. Several of the ambassadors for Women Who Drone are here as well. And everybody's willing to help each other out. So I think that's really important.
And one thing I think it's worth mentioning for our listeners who might have drones or interested in getting drones and thinking of it would be great to go out to the state parks and national parks and do aerial footage of amazing sites. One thing you have to keep in mind is that with, I believe, all federal parks and most state parks, but I'm not sure about that, but federal parks, I'm fairly certain you need a permit to fly a drone in any national park. So make sure that before you go do the right thing, do your research, get any permits you might need. And you might need a good reason to get a permit, because most people who go to state parks don't want to hear drones flying over their heads.
Right.
Just as a little public service reminder there, that's all.
Yes, absolutely. It is difficult for the national parks. They are not allowed to fly drones there. But, it is possible. There is a lot of hoops and authorizations and waivers and all that needs to, be attained in order to fly legally. But it's worth it if you can get it. And
if not, there's always a lot of great places that are not in national parks that you could still go fly around and shoot pictures and video. So
absolutely. And I think one of the great things about Arizona is we have a really varied landscape.
Yeah.
So, everybody thinks of us as just the desert with the saguaro, but you maybe about 2 hours away from me, northeast of Phoenix, is the largest ponderosa pine forest in the country. So you wouldn't think about that in Arizona, but we really do have beautiful landscapes. You go to the south and we've got the grasslands, which look like you're in Oklahoma. It's really beautiful. People can be droning year round in different parts of the state. We do have beautiful national parks, but there's a lot of wonderful opportunities all around.
And Yasmin, what do you fly? What are your drones right now?
I have a Mavic 2 Pro and I love it. It's got the Hasselblad camera on it. I had the Mavic Pro Platinum before that, but it's really great. I love it. It folds down. I travel a ton with my drone and it's great. I can just throw it into my camera bag and it goes out with me during the day. I also have the little Tello EDU, which are the little ones that you can take into classrooms and teach kids how to fly drones. And you just need a little iPhone as a controller. And you can teach kids how to code with them, and they get the drone to launch, and then it can do like little patterns and then come back and land. It's really fun. It's a great little drone.
Well, actually, kind of leads me to talking about Women Who Drone, and you're the brand ambassador. Can you speak a little bit about the organization and just what you're talking about, going into classrooms and other ways to kind of get the word out?
Yeah, absolutely. Women Who Drone, a wonderful organization. It was started by a girl named Elena, and she had picked up a drone just as, for fun, and was going on a trip to China, and, just thought it was really exciting. She could document her trip along the Great China Wall and all that. And, she got on social media and wanted to see, who else is out there that's flying drones. And this whole organization of Women Who Drone just started with a hashtag Women Who Drone. And she soon found that there were other women that were interested in drones and wanted to learn more. And it just spawned into this wonderful community now. We've got over 40,000 followers on Instagram. We have brand ambassadors all around the world. We've got about 55 of us all around the world. Mm-hmm. And it's really wonderful because it's given women and girls an opportunity to feel empowered and educated about drones. And so one of the missions, of course, is to educate girls and women, to inspire them, and to teach them how this is not just maybe what a lot of people think is just a toy. It can also be a powerful use for different careers.
Can you speak about some? Based on that and some of your experience, can you speak about some of the some of the work that can be done with it outside of, photography?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think most people think of just photo and video when they think about drones, but they've really become critical tools for use in a lot of different industries. So one that they've been using it a lot in is with first responders. Mm-hmm. They can send up a drone if there's a fire on a building or a home. They can send up a drone that has a FLIR camera on it, and they can see where are the hot spots on the building, and then they can direct the firefighters to where it's hotter and where the fire is burning actually the most fiercest, so they know on how to approach it without having to physically go into the building yet. Right. They use it in search and rescue. There's been stories where they've sent up drones with the thermal cameras and they can find missing children, missing adults, really some great stuff like that. It's very applicable to use with agriculture. So that's another wonderful thing. You can send it up and you can actually create a whole 3D model and prescription and find hot spots within your fields. And the farmers can go in and target then where they need to do maybe some more targeted prescriptions on how they're raising their crops instead of kind of guessing and having to manually walk through their fields. There's really so much that's going on with drones. I mean, they're using it in the aviation industry to inspect planes. Right. They can send them up and create 3D models from crash sites, like airplane crash sites, or even reconstruct car crash scenes. And you can actually do measurements from them too. So like construction sites, you can send it up and do cut volumes. If you've got a construction site that's crushing gravel, they can actually do volumetric measurements. So there's a lot that's being done with it. Even in humanitarian ways, they're using drones to send blood samples to remote villages in different countries in Africa. People that would normally take 4 hours to get by car from their village to a hospital, they can send blood samples within 20 minutes up to those people. So there's really amazing applications for drones.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Not to mention real estate, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And regarding Women Who Drone, can you talk a little bit about some of the advocacy and outreach that you guys do, and are you specifically and the group as a whole, in terms of going into schools or having conferences or what have you?
Absolutely. So we do a lot of outreach with schools. So Elena has actually come up with a whole curriculum that's being implemented in New York public schools.
That's great.
And she goes in and she talks about the drones, basically kind of what I've just said already, different careers that you can go into, how this organization started. And really one of the most important parts is getting the drone into the hands of these children. Yeah. So once they get it in their hands, then they get the chance. That's where the excitement is. And that's really where the inspiration comes from. They get their hands on it, they get to move it around, and then they get to look down at the screen and see what the drone is seeing. And for a lot of people, that's the first time they're seeing any type of an aerial perspective of where they're standing in that moment. So it's really exciting. We've partnered with different organizations, such as like locally here, there's a group called the Moxie Girls, which is a STEM group. And they're very heavily focused on drone use as well. So we've gone in and done for International Drone Day. I've done some demonstrations with them there. The great thing about these little telos is you can set up these fun little obstacle courses, right. And it makes it really fun for the kids to get it in their hands, again, play around with it, and then going in and talking to them and about the career opportunities. So it really gives them that broader perspective of thinking ahead. Maybe it's something that has caught their attention that they wouldn't have, that career may not have been on their radar. There's also a lot of one-on-one mentoring that we do. So women anywhere around the country, they can go onto the Women Who Drone website, and we offer not only online where you can learn about the nuances of maybe editing your photos and what are some of the different laws, but you can also sign up to do a one-on-one mentorship where you will get partnered with an FAA certified drone pilot through Women Who Drone, and you'll get an hour to an hour and a half hands-on, and they will walk you through A to Z on the drone from the beginning of this is how you put on the propellers to this is how the app works to getting it up into the air, showing you how the controls work, talking about what are the different airspace that we can operate in, and really just that's one of the great things that we're finding is not only just for girls and for children getting these drones in their hands, but also for the adult women. Is a lot of us, and I did the same thing, a lot of us are scared when we first get our drone. Mine actually sat in the box for a month before I took it out. And I didn't take it out until my girlfriend came over and literally stood next to me and did the same with me, and then I felt more comfortable. And that's one of the things that we're finding that's really critical to getting women excited about drones is having another woman stand next to them and walk them through all that.
Sure.
And they just feel more comfortable. They feel like they can ask questions, and it's an intimate setting. It's just you and the mentor. And, that's really where it gets so exciting then, because then you just see like the excitement build in them. And then you see where their light bulb kind of comes on, like it happened for me, like, oh, okay, now I can maybe use it for real estate, or, oh, maybe they're working in another industry and they start thinking about ways they can use this drone with their own business. Right. So it's really exciting.
Do you actually need a drone to get the FAA certification, or can you pass that test without one and then get one later?
You can actually pass. you can pass it without having a drone, without owning one, without ever flying one.
Right.
So there's not any type of a practical portion of the test. It's just a knowledge test.
Right.
So it's, I believe, 60 or 70 questions. I can't remember now.
Right.
But there's questions. It's just a knowledge test you go in, you take, and I believe it's a 70% for a passing score. So that's kind of something I know that the FAA is looking into, because there isn't currently that practical part. I do believe in other countries there is a practical exam along with the knowledge part. But right now in the U.S., it's just the knowledge exam. And that's good
to me
for 2
that there
years.
really should be a practical part to it. It's like driving a car. I mean, it's the same thing. You can't just take a written test and say, okay, I can drive.
Right.
It's more than that.
I agree. I think eventually we'll get there. Right now, they are working on coming up with a knowledge exam that just recreational flyers are going to have to take, because right now you only need to be certified if you're going to be using your drone commercially.
Mm-hmm.
So recreational, any consumer that wants to buy a drone can go and start flying it without having any knowledge of airspace and all that. And that's a lot of times, unfortunately, where we're hearing about these incidences of people that are unaware about where they should or shouldn't be flying. So they're working on that. But I do feel like the practical portion will be critical as well. And I feel like that's going to come in the future.
Let me ask, if I can ask you a question. We're talking about all of these proper trainings and permits and all this other stuff. And we're also saying that these drones are very easy to use out of the box these days. And it's true. They really, really are. To what extent is the average consumer advised over to where they can fly and where they cannot fly these drones? Because there are definite rules, and if you break these rules, the penalties could be pretty fierce. So if anybody just walks into a store or goes online and orders from, B&H or from whoever a drone, and they get it and they set it up and they can go out and start flying it, who's telling them what they can do and can't do, and how clear is it made?
Well, honestly, no one is telling them anything. The onus is on the drone pilot to find out that information. So there is a lot of information out there. The FAA has a website, the FAA Drone Zone, and I feel like that's a really good starting point to go and get educated. But it's also, like in the state of Arizona, if what they've enacted a law that any city or municipality that has more than one park has to allow droning in at least one of them. Yeah, and it's different by state on how they do their regulations for local parks and all that sort of stuff. But it's not very easily found, the information. You really have to go in online usually and find the specific information on that particular park, and then try and find if they allow drones in there or not. So there's not, it's usually in really populous areas that drones have been used quite often, where you'll see the signs that say no droning allowed. And, typically that's like the national parks, things like that. So the information is out there. It definitely just takes some time to educate, for a person to educate themselves on what they can and cannot do. And through Women Who Drone, when we do our mentorships, there's some very basics that we want to make sure that we educate everybody on as well, as far as, not flying within a certain distance of the airports, and you can't go above 400 feet, and you can't fly in the national parks. And, some of those basics where, if I was an average consumer, I might want to take a drone to a national park. I mean, they're beautiful. Sure. But unless someone's telling me that information, or I get online and start researching, it's probably, it's not something that someone's going to normally think that is restricted.
Gotcha. Having been a veteran a drone pilot from the early days, you ever lose one?
No, I haven't, actually. Knock on wood. I almost did.
Okay.
I almost did. Yeah. It was last summer. I was doing a road trip with my boyfriend. We were in Southern Oregon on the coast. And if you've ever been to Southern Oregon on the coast, it's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And so we were both droning, and it was windy. I mean, nothing too horrible, but I had gone out over the water, and I went down the coast a little ways, and I turned around to bring it back and I had it at full throttle and it was going slow. And I was watching my battery go down, 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 down. And I thought, oh no. And I almost lost it due to a low battery, but I basically like yelled at my boyfriend and I almost like threw my controller at him. And somehow he managed to get it back. And we were just at like 1% battery. But luckily, there was like a little beach nearby, so we knew. And here's a little tip for people if they feel like they're losing your drone: you can still control it, even though it's going to start slowly coming down. You can still control it. So we knew if worst case scenario, we could at least fly it towards that beach, and it would land itself on the beach, and we could just hike down and get it from there. But yeah, knock on wood. Luckily, that's the worst that's happened. So.
Terrific. Okay.
All righty. That's great.
Okay. Yasmin, it's been great talking with you and listening to your stories. If people want to see more of your work, where can they go?
Oh, absolutely. They can check out my website, yasmintajik.com. I am also on Instagram at ytajik.com, and that's probably where you'll find most of my work. And yeah. That's where you'll find me.
And Women Who Drone is Women Who Drone.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. womenwhodrone.co. Okay. And that's a great resource. We have a lot of information on there for anyone. It doesn't have to be just for women and girls. A lot of education that's available, a lot of inspiration. Really, really great community.
Wonderful.
Great. By the way, I was going through your Instagram, and way down towards the bottom, you have a little thing, a picture of the photography catalog from back in the 70s. I have a copy of that. It's one of the most fun books to flip through, talking about how times change. So.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. I think I just found that on the street and I was walking in the streets of New York.
With some great stories in there, some great stuff. And
wow.
Explained how to use all of the cameras that are out back in those days. But it's called the Photography Catalog by a guy named Snyder. And if anybody could find it, it's worth it. You can find them online for like $6 and it's worth it. Anyway, Yasmin, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Great.
Yasmin.
Take care. Okay, it's a wrap of another show. Before we go, question for you. Is anybody out there up for a good photo contest for B&H Photography Podcast listeners? How about a good photo contest for B&H Photography Podcast listeners sponsored by Leica? Let me cut to the chase. Who wants to win a brand new $5,000 Leica Q2? If you do, keep listening in the coming weeks as we give out details of our Leica B&H photo contest. Stay tuned for that one. In the meantime, my name is Alan Weitz, and on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, thank you so much for tuning in today.